The strange noise woke Frank Mason from his sleep. He sat up in bed, listening carefully. The sound came again, a soft beeping from his front porch. Frank grabbed the baseball bat he kept beside his bed and moved quietly toward the door of his Montana cabin. Outside stood two people in black suits, a man and a woman. Their government cars were parked behind them. "Mr. Mason, Frank Mason, former Marine Force Recon," the woman asked. Frank nodded slowly, still gripping his bat. "What do you want at 4 in the morning?" "Sir, we need you to come with us. National security matter. Highest level," the man said, showing a badge with official symbols Frank didn't recognize. "Not interested," Frank said, starting to close the door. The woman put her hand on the door. "It's about the signal, Mr. Mason. The one our deep space listening posts received 3 days ago. We need your specific skills." Frank paused. The news had mentioned something about strange face signals, but most people thought it was just another false alarm. "You have 30 minutes to pack," the man said. 6 hours later, Frank sat in an underground room at a military base. Around him were 13 other people, men and women with military bearing. They looked confused but alert. Frank recognized a few faces from Special Forces training years ago. The door opened and a tall woman with short blonde hair walked in. She sat next to Frank. "Grace Bennett," she said, offering her hand. "Former Olympic biathlete and Army Ranger. You're Frank Mason, right? I've heard stories about your work in the Korangal Valley." Frank shook her hand but stayed quiet. Before they could talk more, the room lights dimmed. A general walked to the front of the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, what I'm about to tell you is classified beyond top secret," the general said. 3 days ago, we received a message from what we now know is called the Galactic Council. The screen behind him showed strange symbols and then an English translation. The message was simple. They need our help. They're losing a war against something called the Vorax. And apparently, humans have certain qualities they find valuable. The room stayed silent as everyone processed this information. First contact with aliens, and they wanted human warriors. "This is crazy," someone whispered. The general continued. "A representative from the council has arrived on Earth. They specifically asked for our best combat specialists. That's why you're all here." The side door opened, and Frank's breath caught in his throat. A tall, blue-skinned being walked into the room. It had 4 arms and large, silver eyes. It wore what looked like armor made of flowing metal. "I am Ambassador Xylor," the alien said in perfect English. "My people and 126 other species face extinction. The Vorax consume all life they encounter. They will reach your solar system within 20 years unless stopped." Frank felt a chill run down his spine. "Why us?" Grace asked from beside him. "What can humans do that your advanced civilizations can't?" Xylor turned those silver eyes toward her. "You humans evolved on a predator world. You think like hunters. You adapt. You improvise. Most species in the Council evolved through cooperation, not competition." Xylor walked closer to them. "But what makes you truly unique is something we call combat intuition. You can make snap decisions under pressure that our best battle computers cannot match." Frank looked around the room at the other recruits. They were all watching the alien with mixed expressions of disbelief and interest. "The Council offers technology and protection to Earth in exchange for your service," Xylor continued. "We need your warrior skills. We need your unpredictability. The Vorax cannot be defeated with our current tactics. And if we say no," Frank finally spoke, "then we will respect your decision," Xylor said. "But the Vorax will eventually find Earth. They always do. Your planet would face them alone." Frank looked at Grace, who seemed to be thinking the same thing he was. This wasn't just about saving some aliens. It was about protecting Earth. "When do we leave?" Frank asked. Xylor's face changed in what might have been a smile. "Tomorrow. We have much to teach you about the stars." The ship that took Frank, Grace and the other 12 humans to Proxima Centauri was bigger than anything Frank had ever seen. It moved through space faster than light, using something Xylor called full technology. The journey took only 3 days. When they arrived at the military academy on Proxima Centauri's 4th planet, Frank's first thought was that it looked like a mix between a college campus and a military base. Tall, strange-shaped buildings rose into a purple sky. Aliens of all shapes and sizes moved about with purpose. "Welcome to your new home," Xylor said. "For the next 6 months, you will train here with the best warriors the Council has." Frank felt the difference immediately. He took his first steps and almost jumped too high. Grace laughed beside him. "The gravity," she said. "It's lighter than Earth." A tall, thin alien with green skin approached them. "I am Combat Master Thrix. I will oversee your training." His voice sounded like metal scraping on stone. "Follow me to the testing grounds." The first week was just tests. The humans ran, jumped, lifted, and fought against machines that measured their abilities. The alien scientists watched with growing interest. "Remarkable," one said as Frank lifted a weight that their machines said should be too heavy for him. "Your planet's gravity has made you naturally stronger than most species." Grace impressed them even more with her shooting skills. In a targeting test, she hit 20 moving targets in under 10 seconds, beating the Academy record. "How did you anticipate the movement patterns?" a scientist asked her. Grace shrugged. "I just felt where they would go." By the second week, word had spread through the Academy about the humans. Other alien cadets watched them with curious eyes. Some seemed friendly. Others, like the reptilian Cracks, were clearly not happy about humans joining the fight. "Your kind has no place here," Cracks said to Frank during a meal break. His scales rippled with what Frank guessed was anger. "You are too primitive to understand galactic warfare." Frank kept eating the strange blue food they had been given. It tasted like chicken mixed with oranges. "Maybe. But we're here to learn." Cracks made a hissing sound. "Learning requires intelligence." Grace put down her fork. "How about a demonstration then? A friendly competition?" That's how Frank found himself in the combat ring facing Cracks the next day. A crowd of alien cadets gathered to watch. The rules were simple. First to pin their opponent for 3 seconds wins. Cracks was fast, his reptilian body flowing like water. He moved in patterns that Frank had never seen before. But there was one thing Frank noticed right away. Cracks was predictable. His attacks followed a clear pattern that any human fighter would vary to avoid being anticipated. Frank let Cracks attack first, dodging the quick strikes. The alien was strong, but moved as if following a program. After blocking a third identical attack sequence, Frank saw his chance. He ducked under Cracks's arm, used the alien's momentum against him, and flipped him to the ground. The room went silent. Cracks had been undefeated in the Academy for 2 years. "How did you know what I would do?" Cracks asked later, his anger replaced by curiosity. "I didn't," Frank explained. "I just adapted to what was happening." The concept seemed to confuse the alien. The council races, Frank was learning, evolved differently than humans. They relied on perfecting known strategies rather than creating new ones on the spot. By the end of the first month, the instructors had completely changed the training program for the humans. They were now teaching the aliens human tactics and learning alien technology in return. "They think differently than us," Grace told Frank one night as they looked at the strange stars above the Academy. "They're smarter in many ways, but they don't have our instincts." Frank nodded. "And that's why they're losing the war. The Vorax adapt, just like we do." What neither of them knew was that they would be testing this theory much sooner than expected. The Vorax were on the move, and the humans would soon face their first real test among the stars. The alarm woke everyone in the middle of the night. Red lights flashed throughout the Academy as Frank jumped out of bed. Grace was already at the door. "What's happening?" Frank asked. "Emergency meeting in the command center," she said. "Sounds serious." When they arrived, the other humans were already there. So was Xylor, looking more worried than Frank had ever seen him. "The Vorax have attacked Outpost Epsilon," Xylor said. "It's a vital communications hub. If it falls, 3 whole sectors will be cut off from the Council." Commander Thela, a blue-skinned alien with 4 arms, pointed to a hologram showing a space station. "Our regular forces cannot break through the Vorax blockade. Their ships surround the station, and their drones have already entered the lower levels." "So what's the plan?" asked Grace. Thela looked at Xylor, who nodded. "We're sending you, all 14 humans, along with our best special operations team." Frank stared at them. "Us? We've only been training for 6 months. And in that time, you've shown more tactical creativity than most of our warriors develop in years," said Thela. "We need that now." On the trip to Outpost Epsilon, Frank studied the station plans. The Vorax had taken control of the lower 20 levels. They needed to reach the central spire to restore communications. "The Vorax are a hive mind," explained Krax, who had been assigned to their team after Frank beat him in combat. Their rivalry had slowly turned to respect. "They share information instantly. If one sees you, they all know where you are." Frank thought about this, like a single organism with many bodies. "Exactly," said Krax. "That's why our standard tactics fail. They adapt too quickly." Frank had an idea. On Earth, guerrilla fighters had always given larger, more organized forces trouble. What if we don't attack as a single unit? What if we split up, create confusion, hit them from multiple angles at once? Commander Thela frowned. "Dividing our forces would weaken us." "Not if we're targeting their weakness," Frank argued. "A hive mind expects organized opposition. It's not designed to track multiple, unpredictable threats simultaneously." Thela didn't like it but had no better ideas. When they reached Epsilon, the situation was worse than expected. The Vorax had taken 25 levels, not 20. Frank's plan was put into action. The humans split into 4 teams. Grace led the snipers who would provide covering fire from the upper levels. Frank took a team through the maintenance tunnels. 2 other teams created distractions at different entry points. "This is against all standard combat protocols," Thela complained one final time. "That's the point," Frank replied. The Vorax were insect-like creatures with multiple limbs and hard shells. They moved in perfect formation, covering each other with precise efficiency. But when Frank's team blew up a power junction on level 18, while Grace's snipers took out key Vorax from above, and the other teams attacked from different directions, the hive mind couldn't coordinate fast enough. For the first time, the Vorax seemed confused. Their formations broke apart as they tried to respond to threats coming from everywhere at once. Frank's team reached the central spire first. They fought their way up, using improvised explosives to clear paths. Grace's team provided perfect cover, taking out any Vorax that tried to flank them. When they reached the communication hub, Frank set the charges they'd brought to clear the final door. 3 council soldiers had been lost, but they had broken through. Krax looked at Frank with new respect as they restored the communication systems. "Your tactics made no sense, yet they worked perfectly." The Vorax didn't know how to respond. Word of their victory spread quickly through council space. The humans had done what no council force had managed in over a year. They had beaten the Vorax decisively. When they returned to the academy, they were treated differently. Alien cadets who had kept their distance now approached with questions. The instructors wanted to learn human tactics. "This is just the beginning," Xylor told Frank. "The council has requested more humans. They want to create specialized units based on your success." Frank looked at Grace. They both knew this changed everything. Humans weren't just students anymore. They were becoming teachers in a war among the stars. Frank had never seen anything like Alphera Prime. The Galactic Council headquarters was built on a planet-sized space station. Buildings that seemed to be made of crystal and light stretched into the purple sky. Aliens of all shapes and sizes moved through the wide streets. "Quite a change from Montana," Grace said as they walked toward the central tower. After their victory at Outpost Epsilon, Frank and Grace had been summoned to the council itself. Their success had not gone unnoticed. Inside the tower, they were led to a huge round room. Hundreds of alien representatives sat in rising circles around a central platform. Frank and Grace stood on this platform, feeling the weight of thousands of eyes. Humans Frank Mason and Grace Bennett, announced a tall, silver-skinned alien. The council recognizes your service at Outpost Epsilon. Your tactics have given us the first victory against the Vorax in many cycles. Frank nodded, unsure of the proper protocol. Grace gave a small bow. Most of the council members seemed pleased, but Frank noticed a group of pale, thin aliens watching them with cold eyes. These aliens had no mouths, communicating by thought alone. The Zanari, Frank remembered from his briefings. A telepathic species. After the ceremony, they were approached by Grand Counselor Drav, a large alien with skin like bark. "Walk with me," Drav said. "There are things you should know that cannot be spoken openly." As they walked through a garden of floating plants, Drav spoke quietly. Not all council members welcome human involvement. The Zanari, especially, find your minds disturbing. "Disturbing how?" asked Grace. "Your thoughts are chaotic, unpredictable. The very qualities that make you effective against the Vorax make the Zanari uncomfortable." Drav stopped walking. "Some fear that if we win this war with human help, Earth will gain too much influence." Frank frowned. "We're not here for power. We're here to stop the Vorax from reaching Earth." "I know," said Drav. "But politics exists even in the face of extinction." Later that day, Frank met a new human arrival. Lily Winters was shorter than Grace, with dark hair and quick eyes. She wasn't a soldier but a scientist specializing in language and communication. "I've been studying Vorax communication patterns," Lily explained in their shared quarters. "The way their hive mind sends signals. I think I've found something important." "What kind of something?" Frank asked. "A weakness. The Queens use a specific frequency to control their drones. If we could disrupt it." Their conversation was interrupted by an alarm on Grace's wrist device. She checked it and her face went pale. "We need to move. Now." She grabbed her gun. "Someone's trying to access our room security." They barely made it out before 3 Zanari entered. Frank caught a glimpse of weapons in their hands. "What was that?" Lily asked as they ran down a back corridor. "Politics," Frank said grimly. They reported the incident to Drav, who seemed troubled but not surprised. "The Zanari claim they were conducting the security check, but I've placed guards I trust outside your new quarters." The next day, Grace discovered something even more disturbing. While reviewing battle records, she found evidence that Vorax attacks often targeted locations shortly after certain council members received classified information about them. "Someone's feeding information to the enemy," she told Frank and Lily. "That's how they always seem one step ahead. A council member working with the Vorax." Lily seemed shocked. "Or being controlled by them," Frank suggested. "If they can control their own drones, maybe they can influence other species too." They brought their concerns to Drav, who listened carefully. "This is grave news, but not entirely unexpected. We've suspected a breach for some time." "What do we do?" asked Grace. "For now, we proceed carefully. The Council has approved a new Joint Strike Force under human tactical leadership. Frank, they want you to lead it." Drav's face showed concern. "But watch your back. You're not just fighting the Vorax anymore." As they left Drav's office, Frank realized their situation had become much more complicated. They weren't just soldiers in an alien war anymore. They were pieces in a galactic game of power and survival, and some players wanted them removed from the board entirely. The research station orbited a small moon in a remote system. Here, away from prying eyes, Lily worked with council scientists on her discovery. "If we can disrupt the signal between the Vorax Queens and their drones, we might be able to stop them without destroying them all," Lily explained to Frank and Grace. Frank watched as the scientists tested the disruptive signal on samples of Vorax tissue. The cells seemed to lose their coordination when exposed to the signal. "How long until we can use this in battle?" Frank asked. "A few more weeks of testing," one of the alien scientists said. "We need to be sure it works on living Vorax, not just tissue samples." Frank didn't like waiting, but he understood the importance of getting this right. If they could disable rather than kill the Vorax, it might change the entire war. The attack came without warning. Alarms blared throughout the station. Frank ran to the control room, with Grace right behind him. 6 Vorax ships just appeared from Fold space, a council officer reported. "They're launching boarding pods." Frank felt a chill. They know about the signal. They're here to stop us. He grabbed the station intercom. "All personnel, prepare for boarding. Security teams to levels 3 through 7. Lily, secure the research and prepare for emergency transfer." Grace checked her weapon. "How did they find us?" "This location was top secret. We still have a leak," Frank said grimly. The first Vorax drones broke through on level 5. They moved with terrifying coordination, 6-limbed insectoid creatures fighting as one organism. The station's security forces were being pushed back. "Get to the lab," Frank told Grace. "Help Lily protect that research. I'll coordinate the defense." As Grace left, Frank watched the security feeds. The Vorax moved in patterns, always covering each other, but he had fought them before. He had learned. Station security. This is Frank Mason. Break into 5-person teams. Don't stay in one place. Keep moving, hit, and retreat. Don't let them predict your positions. The council soldiers were hesitant at first, but as Frank's tactics started working, they adapted quickly. The Vorax advance slowed. But then a new type of Vorax appeared on the feeds, larger with heavier armor and what looked like built-in weapons. The Leak Guards. Frank grabbed a weapon and headed for level 6. He found a group of council soldiers pinned down by the elite Vorax. "Cover me," he told them, then ran across the corridor to draw fire. The Vorax turned to track him, but Frank was already sliding beneath a fallen door panel. He came up behind them and fired at the joints in their armor, the weak spots he had noticed in previous battles. 2 Vorax fell before the others could turn. The council soldiers, seeing the opportunity, concentrated their fire on the remaining elites. In the lab, Grace and Lily worked frantically to download the research data. 3 Vorax drones broke through the door. Grace fired, taking down one, but the others kept coming. Lily threw a container of chemicals at them, creating a cloud of smoke. In the confusion, Grace shot the second drone. The third lunged at her, knocking her weapon away. Grace fought hand-to-hand with the creature, using the combat moves Frank had taught her. She managed to pin its arms and slam it into a wall repeatedly until it stopped moving. Frank arrived at the lab to find Grace standing over the fallen Vorax, breathing hard. "We need to go," Lily said, holding a data crystal. "I have everything we need." They fought their way to the escape shuttles. As they left the station, they saw more Vorax ships arriving. "They really didn't want us to have this signal," Grace said. Frank watched as the station grew smaller behind them. "No, they didn't, which means it must work." What they didn't realize was that something unprecedented had happened during the battle. Frank had managed to predict Vorax movements based on subtle patterns in their behavior, something no council species had ever been able to do. And even more remarkable, the last Vorax drone that Grace had fought wasn't dead. It was still moving, but differently, as if it were acting independently rather than as part of the hive. The Council's military intelligence labeled Frank with a new designation after reviewing the battle footage: Earth's Deadliest Warrior. The name spread quickly through Council space. But the true weapon against the Vorax might not be Frank's combat skills, but the captured drone now secured in their shuttle's cargo hold. Back at Council headquarters, Frank stood before the military command with a bold plan. "We need to strike at the heart of the Vorax," he said, pointing to the star map. "Not just defend, but attack. The alien commanders looked doubtful. Admiral Zorn, a veteran of 100 battles, spoke first. "We've tried direct attacks before. The Vorax always know we're coming." Frank nodded. "Because someone has been leaking information. But this time, only humans will know the full plan until the last moment." In the 3 months since the research station battle, hundreds more humans had arrived from Earth. Soldiers, pilots, and specialists of all kinds, eager to join the fight. "My plan calls for a strike force of 50 humans and 100 council specialists," Frank continued. "We'll use Lily's signal to mask our approach to the Vorax command ship." Lily had been studying the captured Vorax drone with fascination. Unlike other drones that died when separated from the hive mind, this one had developed independent thought. They called it Vex. "Vex has helped us locate the primary hive ship," Lily explained to the command. "It's hidden in an asteroid field near the galactic core. The Queen who controls the largest Vorax force is there." The Council allocated their most advanced stealth cruiser, the Intrepid, for the mission. Frank was given full command authority, unprecedented for a species so new to the Council. Grace spent weeks training mixed human-alien sniper teams, while Frank developed new combat doctrines that blended Council technology with human tactics. "The key is unpredictability," Frank told his team during final briefing. "The Vorax expect logical, predictable responses. We won't give them that." The mission launched with little fanfare. The Intrepid slipped into fold space, heading for the coordinates Vex had provided. "Do you think Vex is telling the truth?" Grace asked Frank privately. "What if it's leading us into a trap?" Frank had considered this. "I've watched Vex. When it's not connected to the hive mind, it thinks differently. It seems almost grateful." When they reached the asteroid field, Lily activated her disruptive signal. The massive chunks of rock would help hide them while the signal masked their electronic signature. "Approach vector clear," reported the Intrepid's pilot. "No sign they've detected us." They were halfway to the hive ship when everything went wrong. The disruptive signal flickered and died. "What happened?" Frank demanded. Lily worked frantically at her console. "They've adapted. They've changed their communication frequency." Alarms blared as the Vorax defenses activated. Smaller ships emerged from the hive ship and headed toward them. The Council officers froze, waiting for orders that followed protocol. But this situation had no protocol. "New plan," Frank said calmly. "Grace, take your sniper teams and target their sensor arrays. Lily, work on finding their new frequency. Everyone else, prepare for boarding action." Boarding. Admiral Zorn looked shocked. The plan was to use the signal to disable them from a distance. "Plans change," Frank said. "We adapt." He turned to the weapons officer. "Fire all forward batteries at these coordinates." He pointed to a spot between two large defensive turrets on the hive ship. The Intrepid's weapons created a breach in the hive ship's outer hull. Frank led the boarding team himself, jumping across space in armored suits. Inside the hive ship was a maze of organic corridors, filled with Vorax drones. The fighting was intense, but the human-led teams used constantly changing tactics that confused the hive mind. Grace's snipers took out key defensive positions from a distance, while Lily worked to re-establish the disruptive signal using the new frequency data they gathered during the fight. As they pushed deeper into the ship, Frank noticed something strange. The Vorax were becoming less coordinated, as if the connection to their queen was weakening. "We're getting close," he told his team. "The queen must be nearby." What they found in the central chamber was beyond anything they had imagined. The Vorax queen was enormous, connected to the ship itself by countless organic cables. Around her were elite guards unlike any they had faced before. Frank, Grace, and Lily stood at the threshold of the chamber, staring at the alien queen who controlled billions of drones across the galaxy. The final battle was about to begin. The Vorax queen was unlike anything Frank had ever seen. She was massive, with a body that seemed to flow into the ship itself. Her many eyes turned to look at them, glowing with an unnatural intelligence. She knows we're here, Grace whispered, raising her weapon. The elite guards moved forward to protect their queen. They were bigger and faster than regular drones, with better armor and built-in weapons. Frank studied them carefully. Grace, Lily, I need you to get to that control panel. He pointed to a glowing section near the queen. I'll keep the guards busy. There are too many, Grace argued. Frank checked his weapon. Just get Lily to that panel. He moved before they could stop him, firing at the closest guards to draw their attention. The elite Vorax turned toward him, exactly as he had hoped. Grace and Lily used the distraction to circle around the chamber, staying in the shadows. Frank ducked behind a column as energy blasts hit where he had been standing. The fight that followed showed why Frank had earned his title. He moved constantly, never staying in one place long enough for the Vorax to coordinate their attacks. Each time they adjusted to his pattern, he changed it. Meanwhile, Lily reached the control panel with Grace providing cover. She connected her device and began to work. What do you see? Grace asked. Lily's eyes widened. These aren't just controls. They're history. The Vorax weren't always like this. They were created as weapons by another species thousands of years ago. The queens were designed to control the drones. Can you use your signal? I'm trying to connect it now. If I can override the queen's neural network. Frank was running out of room to maneuver. 3 of the elite guards had him cornered. He threw his last explosive, but it only slowed them down. Then he saw something unexpected. Vex, the captured drone they had brought along, entered the chamber. It moved differently than the other Vorax, with purpose rather than blind obedience. Vex attacked one of the elite guards from behind, creating the opening Frank needed. He rolled away from the corner and rejoined the fight. Hurry, Lily, he shouted. Almost there, she called back, her fingers flying over the alien controls. The queen seemed to realize what was happening. She let out a high-pitched sound that made everyone cover their ears. More guards entered the chamber. Now or never, Grace said, firing at the new arrivals. Lily pressed the final sequence. Got it. A pulse of energy spread from her device throughout the chamber, then outward through the ship. The queen writhed in what looked like pain or confusion. All around them, the Vorax guards stopped moving. They stood still, as if waiting for orders that never came. Slowly, one by one, they began to move again, but differently. They looked around as if seeing for the first time. Some dropped their weapons. What happened? Frank asked, approaching carefully. I broke the control signal, Lily explained. The queens were forcing the drones to fight. They never wanted this war. Back at the council headquarters, an emergency session was called. The news was spreading fast. The Vorax were no longer attacking council worlds. Grand Counselor Drav addressed the full assembly. Thanks to the humans, specifically Frank Mason, Grace Bennett, and Lily Winters, the Vorax threat has been neutralized. The Queen's control has been broken. Frank stood before the council once more, this time as a hero rather than a curiosity. In recognition of humanity's contribution, Earth will be granted full membership in the Galactic Council, Drav announced. Later, Frank was offered a position as Earth's first military attaché to the Council. Instead, he made a different choice. I want to lead a new kind of force, he told Drav, one that includes both humans and Council species. We can teach each other. 6 months later, Frank stood before his first class of mixed-species recruits. Humans trained alongside aliens, learning from each other's strengths. And watching from the back of the room was Vex, the first free Vorax, now an unofficial ambassador for its kind. The galaxy is changing, Frank told his students. And we're going to change with it. At the edge of Council space, long-range sensors detected something new. Ships approaching from beyond the galactic rim. A new challenge was coming, but this time, they would face it together.